Hey designers, today's video is going to be all about kickstarting your freelance design career. And in the last video, I chatted you through a little bit about my personal journey in building my business. But this video, I want to be a little bit more practical and share with you the 3 things that I focused on when starting my business and the 3 things I still focus on to this day when it comes to growing my business and making sure that I'm keeping myself on top of my game. So when I started my freelance business in design, I focused on 3 key things. The first one, my skills and training. The second one, my systems and processes. And the third, but definitely not the least, people and building relationships. Now, none of those topics included niching of any kind, and whereas I definitely think that's got value, and I'm personally a big fan of niching, it wasn't something I focused on right in the beginning stages of starting a business. And I think this is key. When you're starting out, the whole goal of creating a business and being in the design career is realizing that you're really in this space to provide value to clients, and that what you're trying to do is combine a passion of yours or an interest and hopefully deliver something that is going to solve a problem for a client and add value later on. So let's jump straight into it. The first one is skills and training. Now, it should go without saying that when you're going to start a design business, you need a skill that is going to be of value to a client base. And you could sort of start out as a graphic designer, know that you can do a couple of cool things in graphic design, but you'd be surprised how many designers I meet along my journey who are surprised at the fact that they have to keep practicing in order to grow their skills. And they are sort of doubtful and disappointed as to why they aren't there and not, running in that expert space like some of the designers that they may follow online. And my biggest piece of advice is always to these starting out designers, you need to practice. Design and creativity and creative thinking, just like any skill, requires training. And not just once or twice, but constantly. And this was a mindset I really had to get into. And it really started when I joined a college. Now, I went to a design school, which is really where they lay the foundation for me to work out how to practice my skill. At college, every 3 weeks, we did a new brief, and in that had a practical component as well as a skills and training component. We were introduced to the Adobe suite where we had to sit for countless hours doing pen tool exercises and color fill exercises and Pathfinder exercises. It was mindless, but what we were doing in that time was training, growing our skills, making sure that we could actually use the tools that were going to allow us to be creative and then eventually solve bigger problems for clients. I didn't see it at the time, but I'm very grateful for those years where I was really very, very exhausted with all the practice that had to be done, but I saw the value of it in the end. And it's definitely something you have to focus on as a creative. You are never going to be done learning your skill and honing your craft. There is no such thing as done. There is no such thing as knowing everything there is to know about the creative field. So you need to keep an open mind and make sure that you are constantly training and practicing and growing your skills as a designer. And whether you specialize in illustration or graphic design, you're a web designer or a branding specialist, it doesn't matter. There are both practical and more creative skills involved in those professions that need to be nurtured and need to be grown the whole time. And whereas design school gave me a really strong foundation, which I will always be grateful for, it's not a necessity in today's age. There are so many resources available to you which allow you to practice and stay fit as a designer without having to sell a kidney to go to college. So whereas I'm grateful that I went and I learned a lot about, staying fit as a designer and learning how to execute briefs and actually design, it's not a total requirement these days. There are plenty of courses out there for you where you can make sure that you're staying on top of growing your skills. I do have a book recommendation for you, and it's called Expert by Roger Kneebone. And I would really recommend you check it out, because in that book, he talks about the path to mastery. And it was a fascinating book for me to understand the journey we must all take from fledgling designers to becoming an expert in our field and what that journey looks like. It really is a rite of passage to go from being a pixel pushing junior to being somebody who can deliver high value services. There is a bit of a rite of passage that you need to walk. Will it take 10 years? Not necessarily. It depends on how many hours you put in and how much attention and value you put towards practice. So let's talk about some of the things that I actually did in order to practice and grow my skills, and of course some of the things I'm still doing now. So one of these things is conceptual projects for practice. Now, everybody has an opinion about conceptual projects, but I'm a complete fan because I saw the value of doing project after project after project after project, learning to expand my skills, test my creativity, and really have fun with the work that I wanted to go into professionally in my college days. And even after I graduated, I still made sure that I was focusing on doing conceptual projects where I really got to flex my design chops and give all kinds of different briefs a go. These conceptual projects are great for your portfolio. And if you don't have a website, it's not a problem. You can use something like Behance or Dribbble or any other platform where you can showcase your work. Talk about how you solved that problem. Talk about some of the imaginary challenges this brand had. Mention that it's a conceptual project because, contrary to popular belief, it does still show your clients that you are able to think the way you need to think in order to solve creative problems. Now, if you are just in graphic design or if you are in a different creative field, there is always a way to apply your creative skills to a conceptual brief and showcase to your clients or potential clients that you can actually do the job. The next thing I did was every free training I could possibly get my hands on. Free trainings, webinars, workshops, live events on YouTube, everything that I could get my hands on, I could find the time for, I made sure I attended. I had a fat notebook that I wrote down everything that I learned in there, and I made sure that I implemented as much of it as I could. And I was constantly testing and iterating and seeing how I could improve my skills as a designer. It must be noted that in the beginning, I knew I was passionate about branding, but I wasn't really sure what that was or what it entailed. And ever since I started my business to this day, sitting in front of you recording this video, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to strategize properly. I'm still learning how to design logos better. I'm still learning every single day, and I'm making sure that I'm staying on top of that training and making sure that my skills are constantly improving so that I can deliver a better service for my clients. The next thing I did was I lived on YouTube. And if you're here watching this video, you know exactly what I mean. YouTube is an incredible resource to find information out there at almost zero to nothing. And all you have to do is have a couple of hours a day where you're absorbing content. Now, this does come with a caution. Be careful not to overwhelm yourself with all sorts of different methodologies around how to do what you're trying to do. Try and keep things practical in terms of modularizing what you're learning at any given time. If you're interested in learning a certain skill, make sure that you set aside a week to try and focus on that specific skill so that you cannot overwhelm your brain and your mind and your creativity, and making sure that every time you watch something, you give it a go to try and implement the learning first before moving on to watching the next video and the next video and the next video. The next thing I did was connecting with other creatives. And now this could be through social media, it could be on Facebook groups and things like that, or it could be a local community of designers or creative people that you could join in a co-working space or something like that. Now that COVID is sort of giving us a little bit more breathing room, it is now much easier to connect with people in person than it used to be. And so you can give that a go. I just found that talking and being involved with other creative people at the time of learning meant that I kept my perspective and made sure that I realized that every step of the way there were people behind me and in front of me, and that it didn't really matter where on that scale I was. What mattered was that I was learning and I was engaged and I was passionate about being part of a really cool community. Eventually, when I did build up a bit of capital and I could afford to take paid courses, I jumped on those like sauce on a hot dog and made sure that I invested in really high quality courses. And I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you if it weren't for the Flux Academy courses. And I took these, I bought every single one of them, and I took them all when I was starting my web design branch of my business. And that helped me land some seriously cool clients and grow my skills as well as my systems and processes. So with that being said, let's jump into systems and processes. Now, while you are growing your skills as a designer, and while you are not necessarily the best designer in those early days, there's still a way for you to provide a good quality service to your clients and making sure that you're actually growing the foundation for a successful business. Now, I'm going to come at you with some advice that I did not take myself starting out, and this is going to be, in hindsight, my advice that I would give to myself starting out. So let's jump into it. Now, while you're still growing your skill as a designer and you're not possibly the best designer out there and you know that you've got a little bit of learning to do, that's okay. There are still a few ways that you can implement processes and make sure that you're setting up good systems for your business to make sure that you're going to be able to deliver a good service to your clients while you're growing your skill simultaneously. So the first thing you really want to focus on is building consistency in your systems. And it may be difficult to know where to even start, but this is going to be about essentially creating rhythms for you internally that allow you to take your client on a very good and really well-rounded experience from start to finish. And I'm specifically talking to designers who want to build service-based businesses. So they're going to be working one-on-one with clients. I'm not necessarily talking to designers who are going to just be hired by other agencies, etc., because that process from client to designer is different. But if you are one of those designers who's wanting to start a freelance business where you work directly with clients yourself, then you're going to really want to focus on your systems and processes to make sure that when you do start picking up clients and your skills are growing and you're doing a really good job, that you've got things in place that allow you to be consistent and professional and give your clients that experience that they are willing to pay good money for. So every 2 months, I made sure that I was focusing on looking at my processes, analyzing what I'd done in the past, making sure I made good changes, improved, iterate, have a look at what I was doing, see where I can change things, see where I can improve things, and then implement that on the very next client project. See, I think what we don't understand as designers, and at least what I did not understand getting started, is that this was going to be an iterative process from the start. And it doesn't end. When you're building a business, it's about growth and it's about constant iteration to make sure that you are on top of things, making sure that you're improving your processes and doing a good job as times, technology, and your client base may change. And remaining agile in this way and remaining sort of humble in the fact that you just will never know everything and that your business could always do with improvement is going to serve you better in the long run. If you're looking for stability and you're looking for a place where suddenly your business is just going to have all of its bells and whistles and all of its boxes checked, I don't know if there is a designer like that out there. If you are, please send me an email. I'd like to talk to you. But I really think for the most part, for most creative people, you're always going to be iterating and you're always going to be changing things and you're always going to be improving your processes. However, you want consistency, and those two things tend to contradict. And so how I did this was making sure that I didn't change my processes or my systems mid-client. So if I had a client that I was working with, I made sure that I followed through with that process that I'd planned out or a system I wanted to try until that client was done. I then made sure that I went back to have a look at what worked and what didn't work and make sure that I made those changes before I started the next client project, and then took those changes on that next client project and iterated in that way, because you don't want to confuse your clients halfway through a project, and you definitely don't want to confuse yourself and suddenly your systems break and stop working, and then you end up in a total state, which has happened to me before. So that's where that piece of advice comes from. Now, the next thing I'm going to chat about is building good habits as a designer, and this comes into your systems and your processes. I think as creative people, it's really easy to get distracted by constant iteration. So on that note as well, becoming a good service provider and actually building a business as a designer is going to require discipline and consistency. And it's very easy for us creative people to get distracted by ideas and want to sort of go off on the next tangent and look at Pinterest and gather ideas and implement this and implement that. And we find a template, and we find another designer who's got a different process, and it's always comparing and looking at how we can improve. But the biggest skill I had to learn as a designer and as a creative person, as somebody who likes to sort of be on the fly, and I don't enjoy structure that much, and I'm very bad at following processes, I had to learn how to discipline my mind and my creative energy to follow the process that I had set out to design, so that my clients got a consistent experience each time and throughout the projects that we were working on. This was the hardest thing I had to learn as a designer, and one of the biggest favors you'll do yourself early on. Work out how to create a process, as simple as it might be, and then follow that process. It's about building good habits, and it's about building good rhythms as a creative person. But discipline is one of the biggest skills you will learn as a creative business owner. Make sure that you follow your process no matter what, and that you are being consistent in that way. Iterate when no one's looking, and when you don't have a client on your plate, that's when you can change things and fiddle and play with things. But don't do it while you're working with a client, and make sure that you are disciplining your creative mind and that you're following solid processes. So 3 of the key areas that I focused on when I built my business for systems and processes was project management, communication with my clients, and finances. And these 3 areas I really want to recommend that you look at right from the beginning of your process. My project management tool and actually setting up somewhere where I could manage the project from start to finish with my clients was one of the first things I ever implemented in my business. Now, I started out with a tool called Trello, and I'm so grateful that I put the time and effort into setting up this project board and trying to plan out the various phases of my projects from start to finish. Now, this was a big guessing game in the beginning. I didn't know exactly how the projects were going to roll out. I wasn't sure what phase was going to come first. I sort of had a rough idea from my college days and dealing with those briefs, but dealing with real clients was a totally different ball game. And it really was a bit of a guessing game. And this takes me back to my first topic on sort of iteration and practice. And all of these things sort of flow into each other. And what I would do is I would test out a system with a client, and then I'd come back and try something else. But the key is I set something up right from the beginning so that I had something that I could iterate and improve as I went along. I quickly moved, after about a year or so working with clients, I moved onto a program called Asana and started using that professionally on a paid plan to give me the more functionality to really organize my projects the way I wanted to. I wanted to be able to use things like dependable timelines and milestones and things like that to really manage how I was actually tracking my client work and giving my clients the best possible experience. Now, I've got a video on my onboarding process which takes you through my Asana client boards and actually shows you how I set them up and what I do. So do check that video out below and let us know if you enjoyed it. But carrying on from this, you need a project management tool. You need something that's going to help you stay accountable and make sure that your clients know what on earth is going on at any given moment within the project. So this is going to help you stay accountable. It's going to help you manage your timelines. And then when you start gaining more clients and more work, It's really going to help you keep everything organized so you can see all your clients in one place. You can see where you're at, what you need to do for each one of those clients, and making sure that you're staying on top of things like the professional you want to be. So the next thing I want to focus on, or the next thing I want to chat about, is client communication in terms of your systems and processes. And the reason why I put client communication in this category is because the way you communicate with your client along the way should be a designed process that you exercise. If communicating doesn't come naturally to you, if you're usually one of those designers who really prefers to go underground during your creative process and you don't really want to talk to anybody or anything, then you're going to need to design a process that keeps you checking in with your client every step of the way. So you want to set reminders for yourself, you want to set automated emails to go off. Either way, you need to work out a process that works for you so that you're staying in contact with your client the whole way through. And this was also something I started very early on. And it was a little bit of a two-way street. I didn't really know what was happening either. And so by forcing myself to communicate with my client, I was also forcing myself to think through my process. What is happening next? How does this work? And what can my client actually expect from this email I'm about to send to them? So in that process, I was really focusing on how I was communicating with my client. Was I being super clear? Was I offering them good instructions? Was I telling them exactly what to expect? Was I checking in with them? And was I making sure that I was communicating every step of the way what the process was looking like and what I expected from them in the partnership? And this is something that you can systematize. It's something that you can process and create a routine around that's going to help you keep your projects on track and keep your clients engaged. And you can also run that communication through something like Asana, through the chat function or something like ClickUp or Notion, whatever the tool you use. Just choose something and set up your first sort of process board and get yourself used to creating a routine for yourself and a system that you can then maximize as you go along. And the last thing, but definitely not the least, and the one thing I got horribly wrong starting a business, is my finances. And I'm not ashamed to say it, I had no idea what I was doing with my finances. Everything came out of the same account. I didn't have anything separated. Nothing was being organized. I was even sending invoices from Adobe Illustrator. So I wasn't keeping a good track of client statements, what was coming in, what was going out, and keeping an eye on how I was managing the investment into my company in terms of financial gain, profit and loss, all of those things, all of those really boring things that creative people hate. I hated it, so I ignored it for way too long. And if I could give myself any advice going back, is get your systems and your finances right from the beginning. Even if you're only taking on one client every 6 months, it doesn't matter. Make sure that you find some sort of resource that's going to help you organize your finances according to your country or your state or province, wherever you're from, making sure that you're doing the right thing for your business or your freelance company with regards to finances. So you want to look at something like an accounting software, an invoicing platform, or something where you can keep everything really neat and tidy and professional right from the get-go. Trust me, trying to do it after the fact and work backwards is a nightmare, and it was probably the biggest mistake I ever made, and I'm still trying to fix it to this day 4 years later. So my biggest piece of advice for you starting out, get your finances right and make sure that you're using an invoicing or accounting piece of software right from the get-go. Yes, you will probably have to pay for one straight away, but it's a necessary business expense and it's going to be worth it, I promise. I personally use QuickBooks. I used Wave for a couple of years, but I now use QuickBooks because it offers me the most flexibility for where I live and the way that I run my business with my international clients and various things that are going on. So the next thing that I really want to just come back to is discipline as a designer. And with systems and processes, this is going to require you to be really focused and disciplined as a creative. It's a really difficult skill to learn if it doesn't come naturally to you, and that may seem strange, but as creative people, we're usually not very disciplined. We enjoy being free and being creative and not being held down to a schedule. Hence why most of us want to quit our 9-to-5s and start a freelance business. But the trick is, if you don't learn how to discipline your creativity and discipline your routine and create structure for yourself, running a business is going to be really, really difficult. Now, me personally, I'm a total creative person. I would much rather sort of float between things from a day-to-day basis and focus when I feel like it and not focus when I don't feel like it. But I learned very early on that I had to create a routine for myself and a structure that I could follow. And then I had to work out how to discipline my mind and my creativity to make sure that I was showing up when I needed to show up, and then creating a habit of doing that for myself. Now, there's all sorts of tools out there for habit creation and routine. There's the Pomodoro effect. Whatever works for you to create a rhythm and a routine for your creativity, do that early on. Fill your time with something productive and make sure that you're creating some sort of a rhythm for yourself so that you can start fostering the discipline that it's going to take when things get a bit busier. And they will. If you're doing a good job of training your skills and growing your systems and processes and delivering a great experience, you will get busier, and your discipline and your ability to manage yourself is going to be absolutely key for the success of your business and also the sustainability of your creativity and your relationships with your clients. Okay, so let's jump into the last topic, which is people and relationships. Now, it goes without saying, people are everything. Without them, you wouldn't be here and we would not have any clients. And I think as creatives, we tend to sometimes forget that our creativity in a service space is really there to solve a problem and to do something amazing for your clients and their businesses. It's not really there to overindulge you, and it's not really there so that you can sort of express yourself willy-nilly. What we're trying to do is use something we're deeply passionate about and connect that value to something somebody else needs. And so something that I learned really early on is that if I could work out how to listen to my clients and to people's problems and challenges, I could get myself way more clients than if I was too busy trying to tell people how awesome I was and how good my work was and how many problems I could solve. It was all about listening and making sure that I was paying attention and asking questions. So some of the things I did early on to establish relationships and make sure I was creating those connections was reaching out to people and starting conversations. And that sounds really vague, but that's exactly what I did. So in my town, I had conversations with anybody and everybody that I could, and asked them about their businesses and what they were doing, because I was genuinely interested. I genuinely wanted to know what these small businesses in my town were struggling with, what they were dealing with, what was working, what was not working. And I actually wanted to see if there was a market for what I could do and if I could adapt my creative skills to suit what they might need. So I spent a lot of time having conversations with people and sitting around on online spaces like LinkedIn and Instagram, watching what these small businesses were doing and interacting with their content and reaching out to them and just asking questions. And the first thing I really want to stress is, if you're going to go into a conversation with somebody with the intention to sell, it's very unlikely that it's going to land well. And I think some people are incredibly good salespeople, and so it's super easy for them to go into a conversation and immediately hit the sale and make the sale, and it's just happens to work for them. But for most people, that's a skill that we don't have, or you won't have in the beginning, is that ability to sell. But what we can all do is we can all connect and we can all listen better. And so I think my biggest piece of advice to you starting out, and if you're still looking for clients and you're not really sure how to connect with people, and maybe you don't have that much interest in social media, you're not that good at it, I wasn't, then real conversations and real connection between you and potential clients, or just people in general, is really going to help you understand what businesses in the industry or niche or space that you're interested in, understand them and what they're dealing with. I think the first thing that you need to keep in mind when you're dealing with these businesses is that they're run by human beings that have fears, dreams, they think about things, they wonder about things, they're worried about money, or they're not worried about money. Who knows? Have a conversation and actually sit and find out what it is they might need from you as a designer. Don't go in with the intention to sell them a service or to even tell them anything about you to start off with. Make sure that your focus is on conversation and learning from that other person about where you can help from an indirect space. So talk to them about their challenges, how their businesses are working, how their businesses are, possibly facing challenges, and ask them if they've considered solutions like the ones that you offer. And just leave it at that. You don't need to sell them something in that first conversation. I think the one rule of long-term marketing strategies and growing your business as a professional is you should really be focused on how you can help as opposed to how much you can sell. Because if you lead with that mindset, it might take you longer to build relationships and it might take you longer to land clients, but I can guarantee that the quality of those clients will be much higher and you'll build lifelong relationships with those clients that are really, really going to be worth it. And they will sell your business for you 10 times over, and you'll be very grateful that you put the time and effort into doing that. Another thing I focused on was asking questions and making sure that I listened. And I think that us as creative people, especially if you've got a strategy background or if you happen to have a really quick thinking strategic mind, then sometimes we can be really bad at listening and we can sort of jump to conclusions and assume we know what our clients mean or what they want, but we are often wrong. And it usually takes quite a few years of experience before you are starting to be able to assume or fill in the gaps and dot between the I's as such. And so you want to be making sure that you are asking questions and then listening to the answers and making sure that you're understanding. And I think one of the things that I did very often in my projects was I kept asking questions until I made sure I was 100% clear on what my clients meant. Now, one of the things that I absolutely hate is feeling stupid and feeling like I don't get it. And I really wrestled with this early on in my business. Do I ask this client again to clarify? I'm going to look like an idiot. I don't know if I should. I think this is what they mean and maybe I should just do it and show them that I can work really fast. And I tried that a couple times and I fell flat on my face a good few times. And actually, nowadays, I slow down and I focus on clarifying what my client means by what they're telling me. So in any bit of feedback that they give me, in any sort of statement that they give me, in any sales call, discovery call, strategy workshop, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm making sure that I understand without a doubt what it is they mean by what they are saying. Everybody interprets things differently and everybody phrases things differently. So if you can learn how to listen and pay attention to what your clients are saying and then use the time to clarify with them, make sure that you understand what it is they just said, you can deliver a better service because you've understood. There's nothing worse than going into a design process, spending 2 weeks investing your creative energy into something and realizing when you present it to your client that you've misunderstood what they meant in the first place. That makes you look like a bit of a knob, and you definitely want to avoid that. So take it from me, who made that mistake one too many times. Don't make assumptions. Make sure that you understand, ask questions, put your ego in your back pocket, and just make sure that you understand. Especially if you're going to be dealing internationally, you've got the language barrier going on. Make sure that you understand what it is your clients have said to you. The next thing I did was paid attention to feedback. And client feedback is one of those things that I think I almost didn't ask for in the beginning because I didn't want to know. It was one of those things where I was like, I hope I did a good job. And I don't actually want to ask for feedback because I was terrified they were going to say something negative and I was just going to lose my confidence and I was just going to be set backwards. And my biggest piece of advice on this is ask for feedback, ask for specific feedback, and definitely ask your clients where you could improve the process or experience for them. and also ask them what parts of it they enjoyed. And this feedback is going to be critical to your success as a designer and as a creative and as a service provider. So make sure that you are communicating clearly with your clients, asking them for feedback, and then taking that feedback on board and doing something about it for your next client that you take on. So just to wrap up, there's a couple of extra things that I did with client relationships and managing those connections. And so I just want to touch on a couple of those as well. My biggest piece of advice in this space is check in with your clients after the projects are done. Once you've sort of worked with one or two clients and it's been a couple of months, send them an email and check in with them. How are they doing? Do they need any additional support from you? Can you offer them any other services? How are they doing? This is a great way to still foster those relationships and connections and to make sure that you remain top of mind on their sort of radar. It's also a good way to upsell services if you've changed your business or if you've added a service, or maybe they might need another upgrade, who knows? But don't go into that conversation with sales in mind, of course. Make sure that it's a reaching out just to connect and to check on them and to make sure that they're doing okay with the work that you produced for them. This is also another good time to check in for a secondary referral, offer them a discount or something like that to get yourself more business if you're struggling to find clients. Your past clients are your biggest asset. Make sure that you're leveraging them and nurturing those leads as best you possibly can. One of the last things I really want to chat to you about is this whole concept of under-promising and over-delivering. And this is a delicate topic and one that I think I've seen multiple different types of conversations focused around. I've seen designers out there encouraging you to stand up for what you're worth and don't do work for free and do all of these things, and I fully stand behind that. I think creatives are tending to be undervalued because the skill is so difficult to comprehend sometimes, and it is difficult to attach a monetary value to something that can be rather intangible. But starting out, I really tried to keep myself very humble. I was making sure that I was charging for my work, but I was also just grateful for the opportunities to learn. And honestly, I was quite happy to tell my clients that I was a junior and I was still learning and that I expected payment for things, but that I was going to keep it really affordable because I wanted the opportunity to learn. And I think this is something to be said for some designers. You know, if you're an established professional and you've done the hard work and you've pushed the pixels and you've essentially done your time and you are now an established professional, you're a year in or whatever it is, then yes, I do think you need to honor your skills and honor your training and the value that you provide, and absolutely value that and not let clients walk all over you. However, there is a delicate balance, and in my early days, I focused predominantly on building relationships and the value I was providing. And for almost every project that I took on, I totally over-delivered for and undercharged. I'm not saying that's the best strategy, but for me, it was about how much I could learn and how much value I could provide, and then making sure that I leveraged those relationships to build my business further. So every client I took on after that, I charged a little bit more and added that value. Then I charged a little bit more and I added that value. And you can learn how to have these conversations with clients about why your prices are changing and why you're sort of like ramping things up quite quickly. But the point is that in the beginning, I made sure that I ate a very large slice of humble pie and checked with myself that I was doing all of the things I've talked about in this video. Were my skills up to date? Was I delivering a process that was a premium experience? You know, how was I improving myself so that I could actually justify raising my prices and demanding a certain respect from my clients in that space? And it really was about keeping myself humble and making sure I was focused on value first. And this can be, done in various ways. And I'm not against doing work for free. I think as long as you're setting expectations very clearly with your clients up front, in terms of saying to them, this is a pro bono experience, I would usually charge X or Y, but because of this, this, and this, I'm happy to do this for you this time. I would really love a testimonial or something like that in return. Please make sure that you are not abusing yourself in this process. But also just keep in mind that it is not black and white, and everybody who's telling you to never do work for free, they're not necessarily wrong or right. It totally depends on you and your processes. For me, I did a couple of odd jobs here and there, and I still do sometimes for free for clients, because for me, it's about going, you know what, I can do it in 2 seconds, whereas I know that it would take them half an hour because they don't know. And actually, I've got 2 seconds. I love this client. I've worked hard for them. They've paid me well, and we have a strong relationship. I'm quite happy to jump onto their website and make a quick change for them. It's not going to cost me anything. And what that does in terms of trust is really good. I make sure that I manage those boundaries carefully. It's my job to do that, and I'm not going to throw a tantrum about them asking for something. I just have to be in charge of communicating where my boundaries are. And so that's one of the last things I want to recommend to you in terms of people and relationships. Boundary setting is up to you as a designer. And in the early days, it's really easy to feel discouraged and to get cross and to feel offended by clients not valuing your work or not taking you seriously. But it's really up to you to make sure that you're putting your money where your mouth is and you're showing up adequately. So are you training yourself? Are you practicing? Are you putting the hours in to refine your skill? Make sure you can actually deliver the job first. Are you a good designer? Are you skilled enough? Do you understand the tools and platforms that you're using? Are you a wizard at Illustrator? Do you know what you're doing, first of all? Secondly, are you delivering a strong process that has got a good system behind it? You're delivering a premium experience to your clients. They feel taken care of and looked after. And then are you communicating and managing your relationships effectively? If not, then maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and have a look at how you can refine things. But getting offended by people not respecting your boundaries as a designer, unfortunately, take it from me, it's up to you. And you really have to work out how to lay those boundaries down and then hold them. Communicate your worth, make sure that you've got ways to justify to a client why they should trust you, and make sure that you understand that at the end of the day, it's about your client and it's about you providing a beautiful service, doing something that you love, and adding value to the world around you, and that it's really not about you. If you want it to be about you, start a hobby and do it like that. But really, when starting a business, you've got to understand it's transactional at the end of the day. And where we want to build these relationships with our clients so that it's long term, you're really there to do a job and do it well. So make sure that you are keeping on top of trends, training yourself, upping your systems and processes, and building those strong relationships. And then you can take it from there and build an awesome freelance design business. So guys, thanks so much for spending the time with me today. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Anything to do with starting a business, freelancing, relationships, tricky trainings, etc. And of course, please check out the Flux courses. They are epic, and I would not be here today without them. So if you're interested in web design, webflow, branding, freelancing, the works, we've got a course for you. So please check them out and let us know if you've got any questions, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.